Welcome to the Alignment Show, featuring conversations with folks who have taken steps to identify their highest values and align their lives around them. Time on this earth is not unlimited, and you may be seeking to make sure you spend your time on things that matter to you. These conversations will encourage you and support you in doing so. Now, let's meet this week's guest on the Alignment Show. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it might be where you are in the world. Right now, you are with us here on the Alignment Show. We're glad you're here. Need to straighten out my background a little bit there. Got some wrinkles in the green screen. Always something technological, isn't it? But we're glad you're back with us this week, as if we do this every week. Well, we have mostly been doing it every week, but we're not dedicated to that. So just glad you're here with us today. We don't have a guest today, unless you count me. This was planned to be a solo show. We may have some friends join us. I had casually invited some friends to come in and share some thoughts. We'll see how that goes. But I just want to spend a little time with you today, thinking about where we are in the show as well as in our culture. So before we get into that, let's take a look at our sponsors. One of those sponsors, of course, ongoing is always my books. DonKing.com/books. For those of you who are on with us audio only, that's DONN, 2 N's, KING.com/books. And you'll find not only my current books there, but as I publish new books, then they will show up there as well. So it's a good site to bookmark, no pun intended. Got what I'm working on right now that is outside of the Sparklight Chronicles. Now, those first 2 books in the Chronicles series are out there, The Way of the 3-Year-Old Wine and Medium Well. Those are business parables. Just had a great conversation yesterday that we'll be broadcasting later on with Andrea Waltz, the co-author of Go for No. And we were talking about the impact of business parables, about how a good story can draw you in and also make the principles that you're teaching more understandable and more memorable. But the next book that will be coming out towards the end of May or early June is a book that is intended to support people who are in creative careers, writing, photography, theater, painting, music, whatever it might be. You've already had some success with that, and now you find yourself in the position of being a caregiver for a loved one. How do you keep creating when the usual advice just no longer applies? And so that'll be coming out soon, and when it does, it will also be right there at donking.com/books. There are 2 other books in the Sparklight Chronicles that are in development at the same time. So got a lot to do in the next year or so, but it'll all show up there. We also want to, as always, mention the folks at SalesWise Live. This is Bob Berg, Kim Angeli, Jeff West. They work together to foster what I would call genuine relationship selling. There's no manipulation involved. If you are in sales, and if you own a business, you are in sales. A lot of people consider sales to be kind of sleazy. That's a stereotype, and it's also not very effective. So Bob and Jeff and Kim, they come at it a different way, a way that is satisfying and is more lucrative. And so I would encourage you to check out donking.com/saleswise to find out more about that. No obligation. You can just learn more about a very effective way of doing business. Goes beyond business. In fact, if you are a pastor, if you are in a nonprofit, really all about how to forge genuine relationships, not manipulation. As Benjamin Franklin said, you can do well by doing good. And so that's what we'll be looking at with SalesWise Live. So that solo episode that we've been talking about, keeping an eye over here just to see if any of the folks who might join us have popped in. I can get so distracted, as we're talking about this stuff. You might remember the Alignment Show started as a result of the pandemic in a way. It didn't start exactly during the pandemic, at least not that first year. But we kept hearing about the Great Resignation. People who would sometimes after 20 years somewhere they quit their jobs and then start a business or start a nonprofit or take what had been a side hustle and make it their full time. But we also heard about people who maybe had gotten a little burned out on what they were doing, and because of the pause enforced by the pandemic, they had time to reevaluate, think about what was important to them. There's this term in philosophy, maybe values, and it's not really a fancy word, but I think we have fancy ideas around it sometimes. When we're talking about your values, really all we're talking about is what's important to you, what matters to you, what is core to your identity. It's not necessarily what you're good at. For instance, when I was in high school, you know how they give you those achievement tests and aptitude tests. Uh, Math was one of those things. And every time I took an aptitude test, it showed that I had a high aptitude for math. Now, the achievement tests, not so much. And I could go into all kinds of reasons why I hadn't achieved the potential there, but a big part of it was it didn't excite me. Words excited me. And so I had a high aptitude for language, and I also had a high achievement in that area. So when you determine what your values are, that is what's important to you, it it has obviously a lot of impact on your life. But then I think a lot of folks may feel like that the things that are important to them they can't do, or maybe they just get tracked into some other uh, activity. It's even a school of thought. I can't think of the author's name right now. Make a note to myself here so that I can look that up. Let's see who talked about, just to make sure I don't forget later, folks. Who talked about keeping your values and your money earning separate. This was a book I read some years back that advocated for the idea of just do something to pay the bills. Don't try to make a living at the thing that matters to you the most. Uh, put in your 8 hours. Give it your best shot. Yeah, it's not you saying that you don't care about it, but it's just not core to who you are. And then take care of those core values outside of earning a living. Of course, in the field of writing, people have always done that. Some well-known authors who never quit their day job, partly because writing doesn't make as much money as a lot of people think. Stephen King does pretty well, James Patterson, but there are exceptions. But for most authors, I think it's the Alliance of Independent Authors shows that most people who are writing part time make about $8,000 a year. I can go check the figures, but the Authors Guild supports that with pretty much the same figures. Again, a lot of factors go into that. But you don't necessarily have to be making a living at that thing that is most important to you. And there's an argument to be made that you want to keep them separate so you don't lose your passion for it. Again, I've seen that in my own life. I can look at things that I was passionate about, decided to make a living at them. For example, photography. I was a professional photographer for a few years. Loved taking pictures when I was in high school. Uh, Carried on over into college, made my living as a photographer, as a darkroom specialist for folks who are old enough to remember film. Okay. Uh, so, I guess it's probably a good thing that I didn't stay with it. But the point here is that because I made my living at it, I kind of lost my passion for it. I'm sad to say that at this point in my life, I don't have a whole lot of pictures of my kids because when they were growing up, after I'd spent the day taking pictures, I didn't want to come home and take more pictures. And so it's kind of sad that I don't have a lot of photographs of them. Um, I made some money playing guitar when I was in college, singing and playing guitar. And I was smart enough not to try to pursue that as a profession. I think I was pretty decent at it. I've had skilled musicians to tell me that I had professional level skills, But I've also I have friends who are professional musicians who tell me that it has become just a job to them, that thing that they were so passionate about. For whatever reason, that didn't happen to me with writing, although those of you who've known me for a while know that I had a decade there where the well was dry. Still, overall, in all the years that I've been writing, which is over 50 years, I've never lost the passion for it, the enjoyment of it. And at times, I've made part, sometimes all of my living as a writer. So I'm glad that is one area where I was able to make a living following my values. So, as we talk on the alignment show, we're just focused on living your values to value your life. A lot of the folks we've talked with have reoriented their lives because they realize life is too short to do something you don't want to do. And so we do continue to support that. But it's been 5 years since the start of the pandemic. And a lot of folks would argue with some credibility that the pandemic's not over. You know, it's become endemic and we just live with it. I still know people who hope things will get back to normal. Number one, normal is just sitting on a dryer. Not going to happen. And number two, it's sort of like we've crossed the mountains. We're not going back to the way things were. There is a new normal. That's a whole other discussion, I guess. Um, Whether or not the pandemic is over, we are at a time, 5 years on, where it's worth asking the question, are people still reevaluating? I guess the great resignation is over, but I don't think the great realignment necessarily is. And a related question is, how often do we reconsider, reevaluate? When you're up to your neck in alligators, it's hard to remember your objective was to drain the swamp. But every so often, it's worthwhile taking a step back, sit down with a legal pad or a Word document or Evernote, however it is that you think best. I still, after all these years, I find that using a mind map is a really useful way of doing this sort of thing. In fact, I'm experimenting with using things like ChatGPT for discussion. Little side trip here. We often say around here that things like ChatGPT, AI, um, they make a decent intern. You don't want to put them in charge, but they're a good intern. They're a good discussion partner. And I have found that you can have a decent conversation as you are sort of thinking out loud. Got some episodes of my newsletter, which is parallel to what we do here on the Alignment Show. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Note to myself here. Let's see. Link to newsletter. Okay. Had some conversations there where I've interviewed one of the characters from one of the books in the Sparklight Chronicles, for example. Well, they just exist in my head, and in a way, I'm just talking to myself. And yet, it really does feel like a conversation. And I find it useful to put it like that. Several famous authors over the years have said, how do I know what I think until I write about it? And so, this is just another way of doing that. So, I've had conversations with myself like that. You might want to do that same thing to think about, okay, what really does matter to me? Am I taking steps in my life to honor that? Is this falling into one of the holes that we might experience in the Eisenhower quadrant? If you don't know what we're talking about with that, here's another note to myself. Eisenhower quadrant. This is the thing where if you think about an axis, the x-axis like this, y-axis like this, those of you who are on audio only, we're saying the x-axis is the horizontal one, the y-axis is the vertical one. You can divide up into four quadrants. There are those things that are important and urgent, that are important but not urgent, that are urgent but not important, and that are neither urgent nor important. Neither urgent nor important for most of us. That's like Facebook, and yet it can just suck hours and hours away. I've pretty much eliminated that quadrant. There's just not time in my life. But what I do find is very often the quadrant that is important but not urgent, that keeps being pushed back. The things that are urgent and important just take over the whole day. When you're up to your neck in alligators, it's hard to remember that your objective was to drain the swamp. So every once in a while, it's a good idea to step back with a piece of paper, legal pad, Word document, Evernote, have a conversation with ChatGPT. What's important to me that is not getting addressed because it's not urgent? Don't want to wake up at the end of life and look back and say, man, there's all this stuff on my to-do list that I didn't get to. Now, there's going to be a lot of stuff on that list, but, the stuff that's on that list that was important, but not urgent. The important stuff is not getting done for a lot of us. And we only know that it's important if we take the time to think about our values. What is important to us? How much of our life is being pushed out by the merely urgent? Maybe it's urgent, but not important. Or maybe it's neither. The mindless scrolling, the doom scrolling that can be so tempting in today's culture. So, listeners, followers of the Alignment Show, friends, let's take some time to remember what's important. And notice I'm saying remember. I think most of us, if we stop to think about it, we really can think about those things. Had a conversation recently with my new friend, Kevin Tomlinson. I've followed Kevin on social media for a long time. Great influencer in the author community, especially the independent author community. I'm going to link, I've already got this written down. I'm going to link to his latest effort, which is wordslingerpodcast.com. You can find all things Kevin there. He had an episode just yesterday, at least yesterday, as far as me listening to it, where he's talking about some existential things, some philosophical things. But within that, he's talking about what's important to you. He talks about how he is no longer oriented towards goals. He is oriented towards achieving what I would call mission. I had a conversation not too long ago. Can't remember if it was on our podcast. I'll link to that episode, which was broadcast just last week, I think, week before last. But we talked about that difference between mission and goals. Mission is something that is discovered. Goals are something that are set. Goals are in pursuit of mission. Goals end. You either achieve them or you miss them and you set a new goal. Or if you don't have a sense of mission, you may run out of goals, which can be very, very dangerous. But mission never ends. Mission is what you're here for, in a sense. And so to have that sense of mission, I think, is more important than goals, because goals can be changed. You may realize that there is a goal that better fulfills your sense of mission. And in a way, that is what underlies the whole idea of the Alignment Show. What is going to fulfill your sense of mission? Now, we talk about in corporate speak of crafting a mission statement, but this is not something that you put together in order to make yourself do certain things. As we said a little earlier, missions more are discovered. What is it that makes your heart sing? Now, the metaphor that I learned for this some years ago from a book called Life 101. Oh, and there's another note for us, because I've talked about this before, but we'll want to be sure it's in our show notes here for this. Life 101 came out, I think, in the 1970s. The idea there, at least as far as the metaphor I learned from them, going off memory, folks, so I'm not sure this is accurate, but this is something I've used for years. Mission might be, for instance, west. I'm whatever I'm doing, I need to go west. And so today's goal might be Nashville and then Memphis, Little Rock, whatever's in Oklahoma, I-40, just kind of following that. Eventually, you can make your way all the way around the world. You achieve each of those goals, you see. But if I come back to where I am right now, the goals may have been achieved, but my mission remains. And so now I may jog north a little bit and let's go up to St. Louis and through Montana. I'm still going west. Missions never end. I think sometimes the angst that we see in our culture these days is people who have lost track of the sense of mission. And so that is something that we like to foster here in the Alignment Show. Now, I can put people on the spot when you say, what is your mission in life? And your understanding of your mission may change as you age. I can look back at, I'm nearly 70, folks. I'll turn 70 this year. I can look back over my life and see that everything is kind of tied together in what we might call a theme, if we were talking about a book, a sense of mission. Everything that I have done has been about helping people to figure out their own unique their own unique message, and express it effectively. Whether we're talking about ministry or newspaper work, working in corporate advertising, working in radio, it all comes together. If you just look at my resume, it could sort of be like, couldn't hold a job, could you? Except for those last several years. I spent 34 years at the college where I was teaching. But it all tied together. Couldn't figure that out, though, when I was, let's say, 16 years old. And so you don't have to be 70 in order to develop that sense of mission. I've had folks here on the show, conversations with them where they've been developing that sense of mission at a very early age. And then we do have folks like we had Lois Kramer on here not too long ago. She's had over 30 years in the career she's following. And it's like she renews it constantly. She's constantly thinking about, do I want to keep doing this? Am I still having fun with it? Am I making an impact? She works with professional speakers to help them to market themselves effectively. In a way, it's a very similar mission to my own. She gets excited to help other people be effective in their speaking and finding the audience that needs their message. That's something that really hasn't changed for her. And so when we're talking about the great realignment, it doesn't necessarily mean that you change something. It means that you become aware again about something. So what's your realignment? Have you taken the time to think about this? For some of you, it may be take a weekend retreat, just you all by yourself, and think about this. For a lot of us, we may not be able to get away that much. I've already said the next book I'm working on is for caregivers. Honestly, my wife and I have been married for 25 years. I don't think we've ever taken a full week away together. There's just always aging parents prevented it to begin with, and then our disabled daughter. It's hard for us to get away for more than 2 days at a time. You can still do this consideration a few minutes at a time in your environment. Sit down with a legal pad, Word document, Evernote, talk to ChatGPT, take your phone with you somewhere and have a conversation. I mentioned Kevin Tumlinson a little while ago, just as an experiment. At one time, he wrote an entire book using his phone. You can do this. In fact, I think one of the key ideas is to make sure that you're not falling into, oh, I don't have the time for this. I just can't do it. You can do it 5 minutes at a time. You don't only owe it to yourself. I would contend that you owe it to the world. There's a reason that you're here. And I'm not trying to get all existential here. There's all kinds of ideas around this, but why are you here? What's your unique contribution to the world? You will get more satisfaction if you're doing that, and the world will benefit more. Those alligators can sure get in the way, though. When you're up to your neck in alligators, yeah, boy. But that's our only alternative, really. So we started out with a question about, is it worthwhile considering realignment? Yeah, it's kind of a leading question. I think it always is. The pandemic made it a little more obvious. Many of the guests we've had here on the Alignment Show uh, weren't particularly impacted by the pandemic. I mean, we all were, but I mean, they weren't forced into that reconsideration thing. They already knew what they were here for. Many of them, in fact, found a different way to address that when the old ways were no longer available to them. A lot of traditional journalists, for example, as traditional media has had its challenges, there's new opportunities that are coming up. This show is hosted on Substack, for example. And I've mentioned Kevin a few times. I'm going to do it again here. He has really gone all in on making use of Substack. That's something that just was not available 5 years ago. So there are other ways of achieving your life mission, of honoring your values. That may change constantly, but the values probably not. Your understanding of your values may change, but the underlying values are probably going to continue. Well, friends, I think that's probably enough philosophizing today. Hope it's been worthwhile to you to have the occasional solo show. Uh, Wish that the folks that I had talked with had an opportunity to pop in. Uh, Life happens and it's okay. Perhaps there will be some comments following up. After all, most folks who follow the alignment show, you see it or you hear it after the fact in replay. And so I would encourage you to make comments. I see all the comments that come in, whether it's on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Substack. Substack probably being the main place. This is on Apple Podcasts. Also, it's on Spotify. All kinds of ways that you can make comments and contribute to the conversation. Love to hear your thoughts about the whole idea of reassessment, realignment, considering your values. I'd like to hear your stories of how you have done that in your own life, because that's going to be useful to other people. In any case, I do hope that this has been useful to you. I will mention one other thing as we're closing up here. If you find value in the show, you can buy me a coffee. That's one of the ways to support the show. If you're not familiar with that, and again, for people who are on audio only, it's buymeacoffee.com/Don King. Remember, that's Don with a double N. Buymeacoffee.com/Don King. You can go to Substack and subscribe. I would encourage you to do that, because that way you don't miss out on any guest upcoming episodes. You can go to confidencecultivators.com to get to that. We've had that crawl going on the video for a good bit of our show today. Confidencecultivators.com. You can sign up for a free subscription there. You can upgrade to a paid subscription if you would like to support what we do here at the Alignment Show. For any of these, I would encourage you to share with a friend. I mean, you know the drill, comment, subscribe. But there's a reason that drill is there. It really does help us to have a conversation. Plus, I work with a limited number of people to help them bring their books into publication. So if you would like to talk about that, just reach out to me. But in any case, we continue here at the Alignment Show. We hope that we do, in fact, continue to bring value to you, to help you live your values so that you can value your life. Not certain who's going to be our next guest. I've got, last time I looked, I had 8 recordings that were in the can, as we say. One of those is long enough. I'm going to break it up into 2 episodes. And so we do have 9 or 10 episodes upcoming, but haven't decided which one will be next week. That's one of the reasons to go to confidencecultivators.com and subscribe, so you can see who is going to be on here with a conversation that you can take part in that will help you to live your values and value your life. We will see you next time here on The Alignment Show. That's it for this week's episode of The Alignment Show. What has it inspired you to do in your own life? Whatever it is, take action now and take the first step. It will help you to talk with a friend about what you're thinking. Share confidencecultivators.com to spread the goodness. And remember to live your values and value your life. We will see you next week on The Alignment Show.